It was just another ordinary afternoon in the city, the kind of day where life seemed to move at a comfortable, predictable pace. The sun filtered softly through the large glass windows of a bustling downtown restaurant, casting warm golden light across the polished wooden tables. The smell of freshly cooked food mingled with the aroma of rich coffee, creating an inviting atmosphere that made patrons feel at ease. Diners chatted quietly in small groups, some laughing at private jokes, others scrolling through their phones, absorbed in their own worlds. The hum of conversation, the clinking of cutlery, and the soft background music combined to form a serene, almost comforting rhythm that suggested nothing could possibly go wrong. At one corner table, a man sat alone, carefully going over his schedule on a tablet. He was a CEO, a person accustomed to high stakes and constant pressure, yet in that moment he allowed himself a rare moment of calm. He had chosen this particular restaurant for its reputation, not just for the food but for the sense of privacy and discretion it offered. To the casual observer, he was just another professional enjoying his lunch. He ordered his favorite dish and sipped slowly from a glass of sparkling water, his eyes occasionally scanning the menu or glancing at the restaurant's interior. Everything seemed ordinary, everything seemed safe. Nearby, waiters moved gracefully between tables, carrying plates of food and balancing trays with practiced ease. The sounds of laughter from a nearby family mixed with the quiet murmur of business discussions, creating a lively yet peaceful scene. The sunlight reflected off a row of glasses on the counter, sparkling like tiny diamonds. Outside, the streets were busy, but inside, the world seemed to have slowed down, creating a bubble of normalcy where everything felt secure. Among the diners, there were also a few who were not here for the food. Some were just passing time, others were people watching, noticing details in the way others behaved, perhaps curious about the restaurant's regular visitors. No one had yet noticed anything unusual that afternoon. It was a day that felt entirely predictable, a day when routines followed their usual rhythm and nothing seemed out of place. The CEO, as he glanced around, noticed some familiar faces among the staff. He smiled politely as a waitress approached to refill his water glass. He didn't feel any tension or unease. In fact, he felt almost comforted by the normalcy surrounding him. There was a certain reassurance in the familiar, the neatly arranged tables, the gentle chatter, the subtle scent of spices in the air. Life at that moment felt simple, uncomplicated, and safe. Yet, sometimes ordinary moments like these are deceiving. The calm, the routine, the sense of safety, they can all change in the blink of an eye. That afternoon, the restaurant was like a stage set perfectly for a quiet scene, one where nothing out of the ordinary would happen. Patrons laughed, sipped their drinks, and chatted freely. Nobody suspected that within moments, the ordinary would turn into chaos. Nobody suspected that a seemingly peaceful lunch could become the backdrop for a life-threatening encounter. The CEO, immersed in his thoughts, adjusted his suit jacket and took another bite of his meal. Around him, the world continued its gentle rhythm. People walked past the windows, a delivery person rang the bell at the front door, and the occasional waiter passed by with plates that steamed from freshly cooked food. It was the kind of scene that made one forget the harsh realities outside, the kind of scene that lulled people into a sense of security. The calm had a way of making everyone believe that nothing could possibly disturb it. Little did anyone know that in just a few moments, that calm would be shattered. The hum of conversation, the laughter, the sense of safety, all of it was about to collide with something entirely unexpected. But for now, no one could see it coming. For now, the CEO enjoyed his meal, completely unaware that danger was approaching, and the other diners continued their chatter, oblivious to the storm that was silently drawing closer. In that ordinary, peaceful restaurant, life seemed simple, predictable, and secure, a perfect mask for the chaos that was about to erupt. It was a reminder of how fragile peace can be, how quickly ordinary moments can turn extraordinary. Sometimes, the calm before the storm is the most deceptive moment of all, because it feels safe, comforting, and completely under control. But as history and real life have shown, the calm is never permanent. It's just the quiet pause before the world changes forever. The peaceful rhythm of the restaurant shattered in an instant. One moment, the CEO was calmly finishing his meal, the soft chatter of diners and clinking of cutlery forming a comforting background. The next, 3 men appeared from the entrance, their presence immediately unsettling. They moved with purpose, their eyes sharp and focused, scanning the room in a way that made even the most relaxed patrons shift uneasily in their seats. Something about them felt wrong, an unspoken tension that sliced through the otherwise serene environment. The first man stepped forward, his shoulders tense, his fists clenched. The second followed closely, scanning for witnesses, while the third moved with a kind of silent menace, as though he had rehearsed every move beforehand. Patrons began to sense danger, their casual conversations fading into nervous whispers. A waitress froze mid-step, tray in hand, unsure whether to intervene or hide. It was a moment that hung suspended in the air, a heartbeat of suspense before chaos erupted. Without warning, the three men approached the CEO. Their voices were harsh and commanding, cutting through the soft background music like a knife. Words were exchanged, sharp and threatening, though the details were drowned out by the sudden roar of tension that gripped the room. The CEO looked up, startled, his calm demeanor replaced with confusion and alarm. He hadn't expected this. Nobody ever does. Suddenly, one of the men lunged, making the first aggressive move. Patrons gasped. A fork clattered to the floor. The atmosphere shifted from peaceful to terrifying in a single heartbeat. Diners instinctively moved back, some ducking behind chairs, others instinctively reaching for their phones to call for help. The restaurant, once a place of laughter and casual conversation, became a stage for confrontation, with the CEO now the unwilling center of attention. The CEO instinctively raised his hands, trying to protect himself, but the men were relentless. Their movements were coordinated, almost practiced, designed to intimidate and control. A sense of urgency and danger hung heavy in the air, and the once comfortable hum of the restaurant was replaced with tense silence, punctuated only by the uneven breathing of frightened witnesses. The smell of food suddenly became insignificant, replaced by the electric tension that crackled between predator and prey. And then, in the middle of this escalating chaos, the crowd collectively realized something extraordinary. The CEO was not alone. A man sitting a few tables away, a black single dad enjoying his lunch, had noticed every subtle cue. The men's body language, the tense expressions, and the sudden shift in the energy of the room. His instincts, honed through years of training and personal experience, told him that this was no ordinary confrontation. Something had to be done, and it had to be done now. As the attackers closed in, the dad remained calm, his mind calculating every possibility in an instant. He could see the CEO's vulnerability, the uncertainty in the room, and the fear of innocent bystanders. Without hesitation, he began to move, his body and mind synchronizing in perfect timing. Patrons watched in disbelief as this ordinary-looking man became a quiet force of precision and focus. Every second counted. Every motion had to be deliberate. The tension in the restaurant reached a breaking point. Chairs scraped against the floor, a glass trembled on a nearby table, and the CEO's wide eyes reflected both fear and hope. It was a moment suspended in time, the kind of instant where life can change forever. The calm of the earlier lunch was gone, replaced by the raw immediacy of danger. The attack was no longer just a threat, it was unfolding reality, a test of courage, quick thinking, and skill that would define the rest of the story. In those first few seconds, the stage was set for something remarkable. The three men were confident, unaware that the ordinary lunch crowd contained someone extraordinary. The black single dad's hidden skill, long unnoticed and unappreciated by those around him, was about to become the difference between disaster and safety. The restaurant, once a symbol of comfort and routine, had become the battlefield where bravery, instinct, and human courage would collide in a matter of heart-pounding seconds. And so, what had started as a quiet, peaceful afternoon had transformed into a moment of imminent danger. The CEO, the diners, and even the attackers could not yet grasp the unfolding chain of events. But one thing was certain. The storm had arrived, and it would only take seconds for a hero to emerge, forever changing the course of that ordinary restaurant lunch. Among the diners frozen in shock, one figure stood out, not because he was shouting or moving frantically, but because of the calm that radiated from him. A black single dad, sitting a few tables away from the CEO, had been quietly eating his lunch, his eyes casually scanning his surroundings. He was an ordinary man in appearance, neatly dressed in a plain shirt and jeans, a small backpack resting against his chair, a coffee cup half drunk beside his plate. Yet beneath that unassuming exterior lay something extraordinary, years of discipline, training, and life experiences that had sharpened his instincts to an almost preternatural level. When the three men lunged at the CEO, the dad's senses seemed to heighten. He noticed the subtle details that others missed. The way the first man's shoulders tensed just before the lunge, the second man's quick glance around the room to check for witnesses, and the slight shuffle of the third man's feet, betraying his readiness to strike. Every detail registered instantly in the dad's mind, forming a mental map of the unfolding danger. While the restaurant was in chaos, he remained silent, his posture relaxed but poised, like a predator waiting to act, yet perfectly controlled. Unlike the frightened patrons who recoiled instinctively, he did not panic. Instead, his mind raced through scenarios, evaluating every possible outcome in a fraction of a second. Years of self-defense classes, situational awareness, and a lifetime of facing challenges had prepared him for moments like this, even if he never expected to use them in a public restaurant. He recognized that hesitation could cost lives, and decisive action was the only way to ensure the CEO's safety. He rose slowly, deliberately, without drawing attention to himself. His movements were subtle yet purposeful. He did not want the attackers to realize he was about to intervene until the last possible second. His eyes locked on the CEO, who was struggling to maintain composure as the assailants advanced. The dad could feel the fear emanating from him, the way it clutched at his chest and quickened his heartbeat. That fear, he knew, could be mitigated, not through words but through swift, precise action. As he moved closer, he scanned the room for potential obstacles. Chairs, tables, and bystanders could become hazards in the chaos of confrontation. Every object became part of his mental strategy, a path of least resistance to reach the CEO, a barrier to slow the attackers, and a position from which he could strike decisively. He knew he had only a few seconds to act, and in those moments, his calm exterior masked the rapid calculations running through his mind. The other diners were oblivious to the internal processes taking place in this quiet man's mind. To them, he was just another observer, a fellow customer watching the scene unfold. But in reality, he was already preparing, his body tensing like a coiled spring, ready to release energy in an instant. Every muscle, every reflex, every ounce of focus had been sharpened for precisely this kind of situation, even if life had never labeled it as such. Then came the critical moment. One of the attackers, misreading the hesitation of the CEO, advanced too quickly, giving the dad the opening he needed. With a fluid, almost imperceptible motion, he positioned himself between the assailants and the CEO. In an instant, the dynamic of the confrontation began to shift. The attackers, who had been confident and intimidating a moment ago, now faced someone they had not accounted for. A silent tension spread through the restaurant, as if the air itself had sensed the arrival of a force capable of altering the outcome. Though no words were spoken, the dad's presence communicated a warning. He exuded calm authority, the kind that made even the most aggressive opponents pause, just long enough to reconsider their actions. His mind was still calculating, planning, and ready to act. But for the first time, he allowed a fraction of anticipation to enter his awareness. This was the moment when ordinary appearances collided with extraordinary reality. A single dad, quietly enjoying lunch minutes ago, was now the linchpin in a life-or-death confrontation. And as the CEO glanced at him, hope flickered across his face. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he sensed that someone capable, someone trained and fearless, had entered the scene. The black single dad was no longer a passive observer. He had become the guardian, the unpredictable element that could change everything in mere seconds. In the silent exchange of glances between him and the CEO, the room seemed to hold its breath. At that precise instant, the calm confidence of one man began to counterbalance the aggression of three others. The dad's hidden skills, unnoticed by the world until now, were poised to transform a moment of terror into a story of courage and quick thinking. The storm had arrived, and the man everyone underestimated was ready to strike, changing the fate of everyone in that restaurant forever. Time seemed to stretch and compress at once. In the restaurant, every heartbeat, every breath, every subtle movement felt amplified. The three attackers had closed in on the CEO, their confidence palpable, their aggression unchecked. Patrons shrank back instinctively, some gripping chairs or spilling drinks in their nervous attempts to create distance. Yet amidst the chaos, the black single dad remained an island of calm, a man whose mind was racing faster than anyone else's, yet whose movements were deliberate, controlled, and measured. He could see it all clearly, the CEO's hands raised instinctively in defense, the subtle flinch in the man's shoulders, the sharp intake of breath that betrayed his fear. He could also see the attacker's weaknesses, one leaning slightly too far forward, another shifting weight unevenly, the third with a hand brushing against a table as though looking for leverage. These tiny details, imperceptible to most, were everything to him. They were clues guiding his next move. The dad's thoughts were precise, almost surgical. He didn't panic. He didn't hesitate. His entire life, the challenges he had faced as a single parent, the years of self-discipline, the countless hours of training, had led him to this exact moment. He understood that hesitation could cost the CEO his safety, and every second wasted could escalate the situation from a tense confrontation to a catastrophic outcome. Then came the critical instant of choice. There was no room for doubt, no margin for error. The attackers were advancing faster now, their focus entirely on the CEO. The dad realized that if he acted too slowly, the CEO might be struck. If he acted too aggressively, he might escalate the violence unnecessarily. In that split second, he calculated the trajectory of every movement, the CEO's possible reactions, the attacker's momentum, and even the positions of bystanders who could be caught in the fray. He began to move. Not in a rush, not in panic, but with the fluidity of someone who had internalized instinctual response. Every step was deliberate, silent, and strategic. The dad positioned himself to create a buffer between the CEO and the threat, ensuring he would intercept the most dangerous attacker first. His eyes never left the men, reading micro-expressions, predicting intentions, and adjusting his plan dynamically in real time. Patrons could hardly notice the subtle shift yet. To them, it appeared he was just moving casually toward the exit, or perhaps toward a table. But in reality, he was orchestrating a perfect convergence of timing, positioning, and action. Each movement was calibrated to neutralize the threat while protecting innocent bystanders. The tension in the room had reached a palpable level. The hum of conversation had vanished entirely, replaced by the low, nervous intake of breath from every person watching. He could sense the precise moment, the exact second when the first attacker would overextend, when the CEO's defensive posture would peak, and when the attacker's confidence was at its most vulnerable. That fraction of a moment would determine everything. It was the kind of timing that could only come from instinct, honed by experience and situational awareness. As he closed the distance, his mind was clear, his body poised. He did not see himself as a hero, and he did not act out of desire for recognition. He acted because it was necessary. Because someone had to. Because in that high-stakes instant, ordinary hesitation was more dangerous than any physical threat. And then, the moment arrived. All the calculations, all the awareness, all the instinctive preparation culminated in a single point of decision. The dad made his move, not before, not after, but precisely at the instant when his intervention would be most effective. It was a split-second judgment, a perfect alignment of timing, skill, and courage. In that instant, the restaurant seemed to freeze. Patrons held their breath, the CEO's eyes widened in a mixture of fear and hope, and the attackers were oblivious to the force that was about to alter the course of the confrontation. The calm confidence of the black single dad had transformed into deliberate, decisive action. In those few moments, he became the pivot on which the outcome would turn, ready to neutralize the threat with precision, protect the innocent, and ensure that chaos would not triumph over order. And in the minds of everyone present, though they didn't yet realize it, something extraordinary was about to happen. A demonstration of courage, skill, and human instinct that would change the story of that ordinary lunch forever. In the seconds that followed the black single dad's decisive movement, the restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Time slowed, every sound amplified, the scrape of a chair, the distant clink of a glass, the shallow gasps of bystanders. The three men had expected hesitation, confusion, maybe even panic. What they did not anticipate was precision, calm, and skill that seemed almost instinctual. The first attacker lunged, fists swinging with brute force, confident in his intimidation. But the dad was ready. With a fluid, almost imperceptible motion, he intercepted the blow. His body shifted just enough to redirect the energy, using the attacker's own momentum against him. The move was fast, efficient, and elegant. An unexpected demonstration of skill that stunned everyone watching. The man stumbled forward, surprised by the counter, his aggression momentarily neutralized. The second and third attackers reacted almost simultaneously, realizing too late that their plan had been disrupted. The dad's movements were a blur of controlled energy. He pivoted, shifted, and positioned himself strategically, ensuring that every motion minimized risk to the CEO and the surrounding diners. Each step, each block, each subtle push was calculated. This was not chaos. It was controlled precision, a perfect blend of instinct, training, and situational awareness. Patrons stared in disbelief. Some clutched their phones, capturing the action. Others froze entirely, unsure whether to move or remain still. The CEO, previously frozen in fear, watched in awe as this ordinary man transformed into an extraordinary protector. In less than 4 seconds, the entire dynamic of the confrontation had shifted. The attackers were no longer the ones in control. The dad had seized the initiative, his presence alone creating a barrier between threat and victim. The dad's hidden skill was more than physical. It was psychological, a deep understanding of human behavior and anticipation of the attacker's next moves. He read their intent in micro-expressions, a tightening jaw, a subtle shift in weight, a fleeting glance. Every motion became predictable to him, allowing him to preempt aggression before it could escalate. It was as if he had rehearsed this moment countless times, though it was entirely real and unscripted. The first man, now regaining his balance, tried again, but the dad's footwork and timing made each strike ineffective. The second and third men hesitated, confusion and disbelief spreading across their faces. They had underestimated him, thinking him an ordinary diner. They had not counted on the combination of focus, training, and calm decisiveness. In the space of 4 seconds, the dad had not only protected the CEO but also shifted the psychological balance, turning intimidation into hesitation. By the end of those few heart-pounding moments, the attackers were off balance, disoriented, and unsure. The CEO, finally able to breathe, realized that the threat had been neutralized before it could escalate further. The dad had revealed his hidden skill without fanfare, without shouting, without seeking attention. It was a pure, unspoken demonstration of courage and capability, a moment that would forever change the perception of everyone in the room. And as the dust settled, the significance of what had just occurred began to sink in. A quiet, humble man, sitting alone just moments ago, had prevented potential disaster through skill, intuition, and sheer presence of mind. The restaurant, once filled with casual chatter and laughter, was now a scene of awestruck silence. Patrons exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others whispering about what they had just witnessed. This was more than a physical intervention. It was a revelation. Ordinary people, equipped with hidden skills and courage, can rise to extraordinary challenges in the blink of an eye. In just 4 seconds, the black single dad had transformed a terrifying, chaotic moment into a demonstration of human capability and composure under pressure. And though he remained calm, almost invisible in demeanor, his impact would be remembered long after the lunch hour ended. The restaurant, once a scene of ordinary lunchtime calm, was now a theater of tension. Patrons froze, wide-eyed, some gripping chairs or phones as if holding onto them could anchor them from the chaos. But in the center of it all, the black single dad had become the pivot of the unfolding drama. His swift, precise actions in the previous seconds had shifted the balance, and now the tide was beginning to turn. The attackers, who had come in with aggression and confidence, were suddenly unsure. The first man, who had lunged with raw force, stumbled backward, off balance and startled by the dad's unexpected skill. The second and third, trying to regroup and regain control, hesitated as they watched their companion falter. Confusion flickered across their faces, a mix of disbelief and fear. They had expected easy intimidation, not a counterforce they hadn't anticipated. The dad moved with calculated efficiency, positioning himself strategically between the CEO and the attackers. Each step was deliberate, each gesture precise. He kept his body low and balanced, ready to respond to any sudden movements. The CEO, previously frozen in terror, felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time since the attack began, he sensed safety, not because the threat had vanished but because someone capable was now in control. As the attackers advanced again, the dad's presence alone altered their mindset. Their aggression began to waver, hesitation creeping into their movements. What had once been a display of dominance and intimidation now became a moment of uncertainty. The psychological shift was palpable. The attackers no longer led the scene, they reacted to him. And with that subtle but critical shift, control began to return to the room. Patrons slowly began to breathe, their instinctual fear giving way to cautious observation. Some whispered in disbelief, others simply stared, trying to comprehend how a single man had neutralized what had seemed like an imminent threat. The dad's calm, controlled energy spread through the room like a stabilizing force, reassuring the frightened and giving confidence to those who had felt helpless. The attackers, realizing their initial advantage had vanished, tried one last move, but the dad anticipated it. With fluid motions, he blocked and redirected their momentum, leaving them disoriented and off balance. In that moment, chaos gave way to control. The energy in the restaurant shifted. What had been fear and confusion transformed into astonishment and a dawning understanding that the danger had passed. Even the CEO, still catching his breath, watched in awe as the dad subtly signaled his readiness, never overplaying his actions, never seeking attention. Every motion was efficient, precise, and purposeful. The attackers, now bewildered, had no choice but to retreat, their earlier confidence shattered. Within moments, the threat that had dominated the restaurant's atmosphere was neutralized entirely. And yet, the dad did not celebrate or draw attention to himself. He remained composed, quietly ensuring that the CEO was safe, that no one else had been hurt, and that the attackers had been contained. The room's tension slowly unraveled, replaced by murmurs of astonishment and relief. Diners began to return to their seats, the ordinary rhythm of lunch slowly resuming, though forever altered by what had transpired. It was a profound transformation, from chaos to control, from fear to security, all in the span of a few seconds. The dad's presence had been the decisive factor, a reminder that calm, skill and awareness could prevail even in the most unpredictable and dangerous situations. The restaurant, once a scene of ordinary routine, had become the stage for an extraordinary display of courage and competence. In that moment, everyone realized something vital. Danger could strike anywhere, but so could courage. The dad had taken control not with force alone, but with precision, timing and awareness, turning a terrifying ordeal into a story of heroism that would be remembered long after the plates had been cleared and the lunch hour ended. The tension that had gripped the restaurant for what felt like an eternity began to ebb. The attackers, disoriented and shaken, had retreated, their confidence completely shattered by the unexpected skill and composure of the black single dad. The CO, still processing the surreal sequence of events, finally exhaled, a mixture of relief and disbelief washing over him. The danger that had seemed imminent only moments ago was now behind him, and yet the adrenaline lingered, sharp and electric, coursing through his veins. Around them, the restaurant's patrons slowly began to return to a semblance of normalcy. Chairs were righted, dropped utensils picked up, and cautious murmurs replaced the fearful silence. But there was an unmistakable change in the atmosphere. Conversations, when they resumed, were punctuated by whispers of astonishment, disbelief, and admiration. Everyone present sensed that they had witnessed something extraordinary, a real-life moment of heroism that would not soon be forgotten. The CO, his hands still trembling slightly, rose from his chair and approached the man who had become the unlikely hero of the afternoon. His eyes met the dad's, and in that gaze was a wordless acknowledgement of courage, skill, and selflessness. The CEO's voice, thick with emotion, finally found words. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, each syllable carrying the weight of profound gratitude. "You saved my life." The dad, humble as ever, shook his head. He refused the idea of being called a hero. "I just did what anyone should do," he replied quietly, his tone calm, almost matter-of-fact. There was no flourish, no desire for recognition, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the threat had been neutralized and that no one had been seriously hurt. For him, the act was instinctive, born of experience, preparation, and a deep sense of responsibility, not the pursuit of accolades. Staff members, once frozen in shock, now began to approach, their faces a mixture of relief and curiosity. Questions were asked, congratulations offered, and the story of those 4 seconds began to spread throughout the restaurant. Patrons leaned closer, eager to hear every detail of how an ordinary-looking man had so decisively altered the outcome of a life-threatening situation. Even strangers, previously strangers to each other, exchanged nods and murmurs of amazement. News of the incident began to ripple outward. Some witnesses posted videos on social media, others called friends and family to recount the unbelievable events. Within hours, the story of a black single dad's hidden skill saving a CEO in a restaurant became more than a local anecdote. It was a moment of inspiration, a testament to courage under pressure, and a reminder that heroes often emerge when least expected. Meanwhile, the CEO insisted on covering the dad's lunch, a small gesture in comparison to the life-altering act that had just occurred. Yet it symbolized the profound gratitude he felt, a recognition that went beyond words or gestures. The two men shared a quiet conversation amid the resumed bustle of the restaurant, a private acknowledgement of courage, respect, and humanity in the face of danger. By the time the lunch hour ended, the restaurant had returned to its normal rhythm. But something intangible had shifted. Patrons walked away carrying a story that would be retold countless times, a story of courage, quick thinking, and the extraordinary impact one person could have in a matter of seconds. The dad, leaving quietly, did so without fanfare, a silent guardian whose actions had changed the course of events and touched the lives of everyone present. In those moments, it became clear that heroism doesn't always wear a uniform or seek applause. Sometimes, it sits quietly in the corner, unnoticed until the precise moment it is needed. And when it emerges, it can transform fear into safety, chaos into calm, and ordinary people into witnesses of something truly remarkable. The aftermath of that day was not just the CEO's gratitude, nor the attacker's retreat. It was a powerful reminder that courage, preparation, and decisiveness could leave an indelible mark on the world, even in the span of a few fleeting seconds. As the restaurant slowly returned to its normal rhythm, a quiet reflection settled over everyone present. The adrenaline, which had surged through the room in chaotic waves just moments before, began to ebb, leaving behind a lingering sense of awe. Patrons exchanged glances, some still trembling slightly, others whispering in disbelief at what they had witnessed. It was a moment that none would forget, a real-life story of courage, instinct, and quick thinking that had unfolded in the span of mere seconds. The black single dad, now a silent figure moving toward the exit, left behind more than just the memory of a heroic act. He had demonstrated a profound truth, that ordinary people, when faced with extraordinary circumstances, can rise to the occasion and change the course of events in ways that seem almost miraculous. His actions were not fueled by fame or recognition, but by awareness, preparation, and a deeply ingrained sense of responsibility. In doing so, he had transformed fear into hope and chaos into order, leaving an indelible impact on everyone present. The CO, still processing the intensity of the encounter, understood that his life had been spared by something far beyond luck. He had witnessed firsthand the power of readiness and composure under pressure. The dad's hidden skills had been honed over years of life experience and discipline, a quiet testament to the idea that courage often manifests in unexpected forms. It was a reminder that heroism does not always come with accolades or fanfare. Sometimes it emerges from ordinary individuals who possess extraordinary presence of mind. Observers, too, left the restaurant with something lasting. The moment became more than just an incident, it became a lesson. People realized the value of situational awareness, the importance of remaining calm in the face of danger, and the power of decisive action when it matters most. They saw that true courage is measured not by appearances but by the ability to act effectively in critical moments, often without seeking attention or recognition. In the days that followed, the story spread far beyond the restaurant's walls. Social media posts, news articles, and first-hand accounts highlighted the heroism of a single dad who had acted instinctively to protect a stranger. The narrative inspired people from all walks of life, serving as a reminder that bravery can appear in the most unexpected places and that preparation, whether physical, mental, or emotional, can make the difference between disaster and safety. More importantly, the story encouraged reflection. Each person who heard it was prompted to consider how they might respond in a moment of crisis. Could they remain calm under pressure? Could they assess danger quickly and act decisively? The dad's example became a guide, a model of how courage, awareness, and skill could converge to create extraordinary outcomes in ordinary circumstances. Ultimately, the events of that day were not just about a violent confrontation or a narrowly avoided tragedy, they were about inspiration, hope, and the human capacity for heroism. They were a reminder that heroes exist in every community, often unnoticed, waiting for the moment when their actions can transform fear into safety, despair into relief, and uncertainty into order. As the sun set over the city and the restaurant emptied, one truth remained: courage is not always loud and heroism is not always visible. Sometimes, it is quiet, humble, and deliberate, revealed in a few fleeting seconds when it matters most. The legacy of that lunch would endure, not in headlines or fame, but in the hearts and minds of those who witnessed it. It was a story that would continue to inspire, a lesson in the extraordinary potential within ordinary people, and a reminder that even the smallest actions taken with skill and conviction can change lives forever.